The grand arena of Vexillor Prime hummed with the kind of tension that made even the most seasoned warriors check their pulse regulators. I adjusted my optical sensors, trying to make sense of what I was witnessing. 300 cycles I had been covering intergalactic combat exhibitions, and never, not once, had I seen anything quite this absurd. Commander Thrace stood at the center platform, his forearms crossed in what we Vexillans consider the ultimate gesture of dismissal. His crimson scales caught the overhead lights, making him look like some ancient war deity carved from ruby and arrogance. The human delegation sat in the visitors' gallery, looking about as comfortable as a Glorbian sandworm at a water park. "These creatures," Thrace announced, his voice booming through the arena's acoustic enhancers, "these soft-skinned mammals from the third planet of an unremarkable star system expect us to believe they possess warrior spirit?" He laughed, a sound like rocks grinding in a trash compactor. "Look at them. No natural armor, no venom sacs, no electromagnetic sensing organs. They cannot even see properly into the infrared spectrum." I zoomed in on the human group with my recording equipment. 12 of them, dressed in matching blue uniforms that seemed designed more for comfort than combat. Their faces showed a range of emotions, none of which appeared particularly warlike. One of them, a male with graying hair at his temples, maintained a diplomatic smile that could have frozen helium. That was Ambassador Marcus Holland, if my research was correct. 52 years old in human reckoning, veteran of something called the European Union Peacekeeping Forces, and currently responsible for keeping his species from being laughed out of the Galactic Assembly before they even got their membership approved. Poor bastard. "The humans," Thrace continued, clearly enjoying himself now, "have submitted an application to join the Assembly's Security Council. They wish to contribute military forces to our collective defense." He paused for effect, letting the crowd's murmurs build. "I have reviewed their physiological data. Do you know what temperature causes their bodies to cease functioning? A mere 43 degrees. We Vexillans consider that a pleasant afternoon." Scattered laughter rippled through the assembled dignitaries. I noticed a Korthian ambassador actually slapping his knee ridges, which was rich considering his species had only been admitted to the Assembly 15 cycles ago after proving they could build a decent warp drive. But here was the thing about my job, the part that kept it interesting after 3 centuries of covering the same grandstanding politicians and overconfident military commanders. I had learned to watch the quiet ones, the beings who did not react, who sat very still while chaos unfolded around them. And in that human delegation, one of them sat so still she might have been carved from stone. She was young by human standards, maybe late 20s in their years. Dark hair pulled back into what I had learned was called a ponytail, a practical style that kept it away from her face. Her skin was several shades darker than Holland's, what humans termed a deep brown, but it was her eyes that caught my attention through the zoom lens. While everyone else in her group looked either embarrassed or angry, her eyes were doing calculations. I had seen that look before, on the face of a Threnxian siege master, right before she solved a fortress defense that had stumped military tacticians for decades. It was the look of someone running through scenarios, testing variables, finding solutions. Thrace was still pontificating. "Their combat trials. I have watched the recordings. They strike each other with padded gloves, stopping when minor blood appears. They have rules about which body parts may be targeted. They call this boxing, wrestling, mixed martial arts." He spat the terms like they were toxic waste. "We call it dancing." Now the female human stood up. Just stood. Nothing dramatic about it. But somehow the movement carried weight. Ambassador Holland noticed immediately, reaching out as if to stop her, but she had already stepped past him into the aisle. "Commander Thrace," she called out, her voice clear and surprisingly powerful for such a small frame. "Humans topped out at maybe 2 meters if you were generous, and this one could not have been more than 1.7. I appreciate your analysis of human physiology and combat traditions." Thrace turned, clearly delighted to have drawn a response. "Ah, one of them speaks. Tell me, little mammal, do you object to my assessment? Do you claim your species possesses true warrior courage?" She smiled then, and I caught it perfectly on camera. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone about to educate you on a subject you thought you understood. "I do not claim anything, Commander, but I would like to propose a practical demonstration. You have this magnificent arena, designed for combat assessment. You clearly have doubts about human capabilities." She paused, looking around at the assembled crowd. "So let me step into your ring before anyone else moves. Let me show you what human courage looks like." The arena went dead silent. Even the atmospheric processors seemed to pause. "You?" Thrace looked genuinely confused. "You would challenge me to combat?" "Not you specifically," she replied, descending the steps from the gallery with measured precision. "That would be rude, considering you are hosting us. But I noticed your arena has combat drones, training automatons designed to test warrior candidates. Activate 1. Your choice of difficulty. I will face it unarmed, since you seem to think our lack of natural weapons is such a disadvantage." Ambassador Holland had found his voice. "Lieutenant Maya Okafor, stand down. That is an order." She paused, turning slightly. "With respect, Ambassador, I am officially on leave for the next 6 hours. I checked before we left the diplomatic vessel. Personal time, as per the treaty agreements we signed." She looked back at Thrace. "So, what do you say, Commander? Unless your combat drones are just for show?" I had to admire the trap she had set. If Thrace backed down now, he would look weak in front of the entire assembly. If he accepted, he would be seen as a bully for letting his automated systems attack an unarmed visitor. Either way, the humans had shifted the narrative. Thrace's scales flushed a deeper crimson. "Very well, human. We shall see this courage you claim. Arena Master, activate a Level 3 training drone." A collective intake of breath swept through the crowd. Level 3 was designed for Vexillan warrior candidates who had already completed 2 cycles of combat training. The drones at that level did not have safety limiters beyond the most basic. They would stop attacking if you lost consciousness or died, but broken bones and severe lacerations were considered acceptable training outcomes. The arena floor, a circle 50 meters in diameter, began to transform. Panels slid back, revealing a harder combat surface designed to handle impacts that would crack normal flooring. Weapon racks descended from the ceiling, offering various implements of destruction to any combatant who wanted them. Lieutenant Maya Okafor, human, walked to the center of the arena floor like she was heading to a casual appointment. She wore no armor, carried no weapons. Her uniform was standard diplomatic attire, a blue jacket and dark pants that looked about as protective as tissue paper. She did bend down to remove her shoes, which struck me as odd, until I realized she wanted better contact with the floor. She also removed her jacket, leaving her in a simple white shirt and those dark pants. Then she stretched, a series of movements that looked almost like a ritual, rolling her shoulders, rotating her neck, shaking out her hands. The combat drone emerged from its holding bay with a mechanical whine that sounded almost predatory. 2.4 meters tall, constructed from reinforced titanium alloy, equipped with 4 manipulator arms and a sensor suite that could track a fly in a sandstorm. Its programming included thousands of combat patterns from a dozen different species. It identified Maya immediately, sensor lights flickering as it analyzed her. Then it charged. Most beings would have run, or at least tried to dodge. The drone moved at speeds designed to challenge Vexillan reflexes, which operated roughly 40% faster than human norms according to the biological data I had reviewed. Maya did neither. She stepped forward, angling her body maybe 15 degrees to her left. And the drone's first strike, a crushing blow from its primary manipulator, passed so close to her face that I swear it moved her hair. Then she was inside its reach, which should have been impossible. The drone's combat programming was built on the principle of maintaining optimal striking distance. But somehow this human had closed the gap, and her hand, that soft-skinned hand without claws or armored plates, struck the drone's primary joint with surgical precision. Nothing broke. She was not strong enough for that, not against military-grade materials. But the joint locked for maybe half a second as the impact sensors registered an unexpected angle of force. Half a second was all she needed. Her other hand was already moving, grabbing one of the drone's manipulator arms and using its own momentum against it. Basic physics, really. The drone weighed approximately 300 kilograms and had been moving at considerable speed. Maya probably weighed 70 kilograms soaking wet, but she was not trying to stop the drone's momentum. She was redirecting it. The machine crashed into the arena floor with a metallic shriek that made my audio sensors spike. But it was already recovering, mechanical systems not subject to the disorientation that would have stunned an organic fighter. It swept with its lower manipulators, trying to take out Maya's legs. She jumped, not very high. Humans really were not built for impressive vertical movement, but high enough that the drone's limbs passed underneath her. And when she came down with one foot on the machine's sensor array. Sparks flew. The drone's visual tracking went haywire for approximately 3 seconds. More than enough time for Maya to roll clear of its retaliatory strikes. I should mention that during this entire exchange, which had lasted maybe 15 seconds total, the arena remained absolutely silent. Every being present was watching with the kind of focus usually reserved for religious ceremonies or imminent death. The drone recalibrated, switching to alternate sensors: thermal tracking, motion detection, acoustic mapping. It did not need visible light to find its target, and now it was adapting, its combat algorithms learning from Maya's tactics. This time when it attacked, it used multiple strike patterns simultaneously, limiting her options for evasion. It was learning that this human could move in ways its programming had not initially accounted for, slipping through gaps in its assault that should not have existed. Maya took a glancing blow to her shoulder, one that sent her spinning. I zoomed in enough to see the impact damage, the way her flesh compressed and darkened immediately. That was going to be a spectacular bruise. She used the spin, turning it into momentum for a strike of her own against the drone's leg joint. Again, not enough force to break anything, but enough to trigger the balance compensation protocols, making the machine adjust its stance. And that was when I started to understand what I was watching. This was not about strength or natural weapons or any of the advantages Thrace had been mocking humans for lacking. This was about pattern recognition, adaptation, and the willingness to accept damage in order to study an opponent. Maya was learning the drone's responses, mapping its combat algorithms through trial and error. Every exchange, even the ones that left her damaged, gave her more data. And humans, I was beginning to realize, were absolutely terrifying at pattern recognition. The fight continued for another 4 minutes, I know because I checked my chronometer afterwards, convinced it had been longer. Maya accumulated damage. There was no question about that. Her shirt tore, revealing more bruising along her ribs. Her left hand started swelling after she blocked a strike badly. She was bleeding from a cut above her right eye, where the drone had clipped her with a manipulator tip. But the drone was not winning. If anything, it was losing, though its physical systems remained undamaged. Because Maya had figured out its patterns, learned the slight tells that preceded each type of attack. The microsecond delay before a power strike, the servo whine that indicated a grab attempt, the weight shift that preceded a sweep. She stopped evading everything and started choosing which hits to take, which ones to avoid. A glancing blow to the thigh in exchange for access to the drone's balance point. A strike to her already damaged shoulder that let her lock one of the manipulator arms against the machine's own frame. Then she did something I did not see coming. Though reviewing the footage later, I could trace the setup through her previous movements. She allowed the drone to pin her against the arena wall, let it think it had finally trapped this annoyingly evasive target. And when it committed to the finishing strike, she was not there. She had dropped straight down, the wall's slight irregularities giving her just enough purchase for her hands. The drone's manipulator arm, traveling at full combat speed, struck the reinforced wall instead of her. The impact cracked its primary weapon limb, hairline fractures spreading through the titanium alloy. Not a critical failure, but enough to reduce its combat effectiveness by approximately 15%. Maya rolled clear, came up breathing hard but still moving. The drone recalibrated again, but something had changed in its programming. It had entered contingency protocols, treating this human not as a training candidate to educate, but as an actual threat to neutralize. That should have been terrifying for Maya. Instead, she smiled again, that same predator's smile, and I realized she had been waiting for exactly this response. The drone abandoned its training patterns and went for efficient termination. Maximum force, optimal targeting, no educational value. Pure combat programming designed to end threats quickly. And Maya suddenly had all the data she needed because the machine was no longer holding back, no longer incorporating random elements to challenge trainees. It was being predictable in service of efficiency. She wove through its attack pattern like water, flowing around stones, and I swear on my nest mother's honor, she was barely looking at the drone anymore. She was watching its shadow on the arena floor, tracking its movements through the secondary information, because her human eyes, those supposedly inferior organs, were fast enough to process that indirect data and respond. When she struck, finally, truly struck, it was with her whole body. Not just her fist, but the full kinetic chain that human anatomy allowed. Force generated from her legs, transferred through her rotating hips, accelerated through her shoulder, and delivered through her already swollen left hand directly into the drone's damaged manipulator arm at the exact angle to propagate the existing cracks. The limb shattered. Pieces of titanium alloy scattered across the arena floor with musical pings. The drone attempted to continue combat with its remaining limbs, but Maya was already inside its defensive perimeter again, and this time she had a piece of its own broken arm in her good hand. She jammed it into the machine's primary joint cluster, wedging it between servo mechanisms. The drone locked up, its programming unable to resolve the mechanical failure cascading through its systems. It was not destroyed, not even badly damaged by military standards, but it was combat ineffective, frozen in position while its diagnostic systems tried to chart a path back to functionality. Maya stepped back, breathing heavily now, sweat and blood mixing on her face. She looked up at Thrace and called out, her voice steady, despite her obvious exhaustion. "Does that sufficiently demonstrate human courage, Commander? Or should I continue to the next difficulty level?" The arena remained silent for approximately 3 more seconds, and then someone started slow clapping. Not mocking applause, but the genuine kind, the acknowledgement of skill witnessed. I tracked the sound to a Korthian military observer, the same species who had been laughing earlier. Others joined in, and within moments the entire arena was filled with various species-specific gestures of approval. Whistles, clicks, harmonic tones, and, yes, more of that strange human clapping. Thrace stood motionless, his scales having shifted through several color changes I had never seen before. Finally, he descended from his platform and walked across the arena floor to where Maya waited, still catching her breath. "Lieutenant Maya Okafor," he said formally. "I offer apology for my earlier statements. They were made in ignorance of your species' true capabilities." Maya wiped blood from her eye and somehow managed a slight bow. "No apology necessary, Commander. You had limited data. Now you have more." "Indeed." Thrace looked at the disabled drone, then back at Maya. "You fought a training machine designed for warriors with natural advantages you lack. You were injured, outmatched in strength and speed, and you prevailed through adaptation and tactical analysis. This is, I am forced to admit, exactly the kind of courage the Assembly's security forces require." He extended one of his 4 hands. "On behalf of the Vexillan Defense Command, I recommend the human application for Security Council membership be accelerated for approval. Any species that produces warriors of this caliber will be a valuable addition to our collective defense." Maya shook his hand, wincing slightly at the pressure. "Thank you, Commander. Though I should probably mention that I am not even close to our best fighter. I am actually a tactical analyst. The combat specialists stayed on the ship." The look on Thrace's face at that revelation was absolutely priceless, and I made sure to capture it from 3 different angles. Ambassador Holland finally made it down to the arena floor, along with medical personnel from both the human delegation and Vexillan Medical Corps. They immediately started fussing over Maya's injuries, while she tried to wave them off. "Lieutenant," Holland said quietly, though my audio pickups caught it perfectly, "you just changed the entire trajectory of our diplomatic mission by being recklessly brave and slightly insane. I cannot decide whether to commend you or court-martial you." Maya grinned, though it looked painful with her swelling face. "I vote for commend, sir, but I will understand either way." I moved closer, activating my personal recorder. This was the kind of moment that defined careers in journalism, and I was not about to miss getting direct quotes. "Lieutenant Okafor," I called out, "this is Velcor 3 Sons from the Assembly News Network. Can you tell our audience what was going through your mind when you stepped into that arena?" She looked at me, one eye already swelling shut, and laughed. Actually laughed, the sound slightly wheezy from what might have been a cracked rib. "Honestly, I was thinking that talking was not going to solve this problem. Sometimes you need to show people what you are made of instead of telling them. And I figured if I stepped up before anyone else moved, at least they would know humans do not wait for someone else to take the risk." "Were you not afraid?" I pressed. "You had to know the drone could have killed you." "Of course I was afraid. Fear is what tells you something matters." She accepted a medical scanner from one of the human medics, letting them check her vitals. "But courage is not about not being afraid. It is about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. That is literally in the job description for being human." I recorded another few minutes of footage, including the medical team's assessment of her injuries. Fractured left hand, 3 cracked ribs, severe bruising across approximately 30% of her body's surface, and that cut above her eye that would require bonding. Nothing immediately life-threatening for a human, though it would require several days of recovery. Nothing compared to what could have happened. As the crowd began to disperse, still buzzing with conversation about what they had witnessed, I reviewed my footage and started composing my initial report. This was going to lead every news cycle in the assembly for the next week, minimum. The human who had stepped into the arena before anyone else moved, who had faced down a combat drone with nothing but skill and absolutely terrifying determination. But there was something else nagging at me, a detail that would require more research. Maya had mentioned she was not their best fighter, that the combat specialists had stayed on the ship, which meant this tactical analyst, this being who had just disabled a Level 3 training drone while unarmed, represented approximately what in human capability? I made a note to request interviews with other members of the human delegation, particularly those mysterious combat specialists, because if Maya Okafor was their baseline, their starting point for what counted as capable, then Commander Thrace had gotten one thing absolutely right. He had definitely been operating from limited data, and the full picture of human capability was going to be far more interesting, and probably far more terrifying, than anyone in the assembly had imagined. The arena lights dimmed as maintenance crews moved in to retrieve the damaged drone and repair the floor scuffing. But the memory of what had happened there, the sight of a human stepping forward when no one else moved, that was going to burn bright for a very long time. I checked my word count, confirmed my footage was backed up to 3 separate storage systems, and began the process of turning this into the kind of story that would make my career. Sometimes the universe handed you perfect moments, and sometimes humans named Maya Okafor created those moments through sheer audacity and the kind of courage that transcended biological advantages. This was going to be one hell of a story. The aftermath of Maya's arena demonstration played out in ways nobody anticipated, least of all me. I expected political maneuvering, diplomatic posturing, maybe some carefully worded statements about interspecies cooperation. What I got instead was something far more chaotic and infinitely more entertaining. 48 hours after the incident, I received a message from Ambassador Holland's office requesting an interview. Professional courtesy, I assumed, damage control to shape the narrative. I showed up at the human diplomatic vessel, a modest ship they had named the Endeavor, expecting the standard carefully scripted responses. Instead, I found myself sitting in their medical bay, watching Maya Okafor arm wrestle a Korthian security officer while her ribs were still wrapped in regenerative bandaging. "You know," the Korthian, whose name was Kulvex, grunted as his arm slowly descended toward the table, "my species has triple the muscle density of yours." "Yeah," Maya replied, her face scrunched in concentration, that fractured left hand braced in a support cast while her right arm trembled with effort. "But I have spite, which apparently counts for a lot." She slammed his hand down onto the medical table, which immediately triggered an alarm because the impact exceeded recommended force levels for healing patients. A human medical officer, an older woman with steel gray hair, and an expression that suggested she had seen everything twice, simply reached over and silenced the alarm without looking up from her data pad. "Lieutenant Okafor," she said calmly, "if you tear those rib repairs, I am going to let them heal naturally, which will take 6 weeks instead of 6 days. Your choice." Maya had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Sorry, Dr. Patel. Got carried away." "You always get carried away. It is practically your defining characteristic." Dr. Patel finally looked up, noticed me standing in the doorway with my recording equipment, and sighed. I assume you are the journalist, the one who made my patient into a galactic celebrity? Velcor 3 Sons, Assembly News Network, I confirmed. Though in fairness, Lieutenant Okafor made herself into a celebrity. I just recorded it. Same result. Different blame distribution. Patel gestured to a chair. Sit. You wanted to interview our reckless wonder here. Go ahead. Maybe she will hold still for 5 consecutive minutes, which would be a new medical record. I settled into the chair, which was designed for human proportions and left my posterior segments dangling uncomfortably, and activated my recorder. Lieutenant, your arena match has been viewed approximately 70 million times across assembly networks in less than 2 days. How does that feel? Maya shrugged, winced at the movement, and settled for a verbal response. Weird, mostly. I was just doing my job. Your job is tactical analysis, I pointed out, not single combat against military-grade training equipment. My job is finding solutions to problems, she corrected. Commander Thrace presented a problem. Talking was not working. His entire argument was based on dismissing our words because of our biology. So I removed biology from the equation and made it about skill and determination. Kulvex, still rubbing his defeated arm, laughed. You did more than that. You embarrassed one of the most decorated warriors in the Vexillan military complex. Thrace has been getting messages from his own commanders asking how he let a, and I quote, tiny mammal outthink his training systems. Is he angry about it? I asked, sensing a story angle. Opposite, Maya said. He sent me a fruit basket yesterday. Well, what we think was a fruit basket might have been a weapons display. Honestly, Vexillan culture is confusing, Dr. Patel interjected without looking up. It was definitely a weapons display. I had to confiscate 3 of the items for safety reasons. See? Confusing. Maya grinned, then turned serious. But actually, Commander Thrace has been great. He spent 4 hours yesterday reviewing the arena. Footage with our combat specialists, analyzing my technique. Turns out he is genuinely interested in human fighting methodologies now that he knows we are not just, quote, dancing. This was news. Your combat specialists? The ones who stayed on the ship during the initial meeting? Yeah, we have a whole security detail. Marines, mostly. They were under orders to maintain low visibility until our diplomatic status was confirmed. Maya glanced toward the medical bay entrance. Although after my little exhibition, maintaining low visibility became significantly harder. As if summoned by the mention, 2 humans entered the medical bay. Both wore military uniforms similar to Maya's, but with different insignia. One was a massive male, easily 2 meters tall with shoulders that suggested he could bench press a small vehicle. The other was a female of average human height, maybe 1.6 meters, with the kind of relaxed posture that made my threat assessment instincts immediately activate. Relaxed predators were the most dangerous kind. Lieutenant Okafor, the large male said formally, though his eyes were amused. Captain Reeves would like to remind you that showboating in diplomatic situations is technically against Regulation 717 Delta. Sergeant Park, Maya replied with equal formality, please inform Captain Reeves that I reviewed Regulation 717 Delta extensively, and it specifically prohibits showboating. My actions were classified as tactical demonstration, which falls under entirely different protocols. She actually did review it, the other female confirmed. I watched her. She had the regulation database open for 2 hours before the assembly meeting, looking for loopholes. Thank you, Corporal Diaz. Your testimony will be invaluable at my eventual court-martial. Maya looked at me. This is why I love my team. always ready to throw me under the transport vehicle. Park settled his considerable bulk against a medical cabinet, which creaked alarmingly. To be fair, Lieutenant, you did tell the captain you were, quote, just going to observe and definitely not start any interplanetary incidents. I observed first, Maya protested. The incident starting came after significant observation occurred. I was recording all of this, fascinated by the dynamic. These humans were facing potential disciplinary action for what amounted to a diplomatic coup, and they were joking about it. The casual irreverence, the way they communicated through sarcasm and mutual mockery. It was so different from the rigid military hierarchies I was familiar with. So, I ventured, what happens now? Commander Thrace recommended accelerating your Security Council application. Has there been official response? Diaz and Park exchanged glances. Maya suddenly became very interested in adjusting her rib bandaging. It was Kulvex, the Korthian, who finally answered. The response has been complicated, he said carefully. Some assembly members are thrilled. They see the tactical value humans could bring, the adaptability you demonstrated. Others are nervous because you demonstrated that humans are significantly more dangerous than initial assessments suggested. We have been invited to participate in a joint training exercise, Park added. 3 weeks from now, Assembly security forces are running combat simulations against the Draknor insurgency scenario. They want human tactical input and, quote, practical demonstration of combat methodologies. Which is military speak, for they want to see if Maya's performance was a fluke or if we are all that adaptable, Diaz translated. I leaned forward, my recorder capturing every word. And are you? All that adaptable? The 3 human soldiers looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Maya spoke, her tone stripped of the earlier humor. Here is the thing about humans that the Assembly does not quite understand yet. We are not individually impressive by galactic standards. We are not the fastest, strongest, most durable, or most anything, really. But we have something that 3.8 billion years of evolution on a death world taught us. A death world? I interrupted. Earth's danger classification is moderate at most. Now, Park said, after we fixed it, you should see the historical data. Megafauna that could crush us with a casual step. Microorganisms that could kill us in days. Weather patterns that could freeze or cook us depending on the season. Apex predators that hunted us for food. And that was just the natural threats, not counting what we did to each other. Diaz picked up the thread. So we learned to be adaptable, because everything else on our planet could kill us individually. We learned to work in groups, to communicate complex ideas, to use tools and tactics to overcome opponents that were objectively superior in every physical category. And we learned something else, Maya added quietly. We learned that courage is not about being unafraid or having advantages. It is about facing the threat anyway, about stepping into the ring before anyone else moves, about taking the hit so you can learn the pattern and find the weakness. She looked directly at my primary optical sensor. That is what makes humans dangerous in a way the Assembly has not encountered before. We are not warriors because we are built for combat. We are warriors because we refuse to stop adapting, refuse to stop learning, refuse to back down from challenges that should by all rights destroy us. The medical bay had gone silent except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Even Dr. Patel had stopped working to listen. So, yes, Maya concluded. What I did in that arena was not exceptional by human standards. It was pretty basic, actually. Wait until you see what happens when we bring our actual specialists to these joint exercises. I left the endeavor 3 hours later with enough material for a documentary series, let alone a news report. The humans had opened up in ways I had not anticipated, sharing details about their military training, their philosophical approach to combat, even some of their history that had not made it into the official assembly databases. The picture that emerged was frankly terrifying. These beings who looked so fragile, who lacked natural weapons or enhanced physiology, had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to overcome impossible odds through sheer bloody-minded determination and tactical innovation. And now they wanted to join the Assembly's security forces, bringing all that accumulated knowledge and adaptability with them. The joint training exercise, when it finally occurred 3 weeks later, became the most watched military event in Assembly history. I was there, naturally, along with approximately 40 other journalists from various networks and publications. The scenario was designed to be impossible. The Draknor insurgency simulation involved defending a civilian installation against numerically superior forces with advanced technology and complete environmental knowledge. Standard assembly tactics called for immediate evacuation and orbital bombardment, accepting the loss of the installation to eliminate the threat. The human team, led by Captain Elizabeth Reeves, and including Maya, Park, and Diaz along with 8 other specialists, was given the same scenario with one modification. Evacuation was not an option. Defend the installation or accept civilian casualties. What followed was not so much a military exercise as it was a masterclass in creative problem-solving under pressure. The humans did not try to match the simulated insurgents in firepower or conventional tactics. Instead, they did something the simulation had not anticipated. They cheated, sort of, using environmental manipulation, psychological warfare, and tactics that made experienced military commanders question whether humans actually understood the concept of fair play. They turned the simulation into a nightmare for the attacking forces. Booby traps made from civilian equipment, ambush points that violated standard tactical positioning because they were objectively terrible locations, which made them perfect for surprising an enemy who expected competent defense. Feints and misdirection that split the attacking force into smaller, manageable units. And Maya, her injuries now fully healed, serving as tactical coordinator and personally leading a strike team that somehow managed to capture the simulation's command post using nothing but environmental suits, civilian construction equipment, and what Captain Reeves later described as absolutely unhinged levels of audacity. The simulation overseers ended the exercise after 6 hours, not because the humans had won or lost, but because the scenario had deviated so far from expected parameters that the training value had become questionable. The humans had successfully defended the installation while inflicting casualty rates on the simulated insurgents that the system flagged as statistically impossible. Commander Thrace, serving as one of the senior observers, stood before the assembled military personnel and journalists afterward, his scales cycling through colors I was learning to interpret as profound confusion, mixed with reluctant admiration. "I have witnessed today," he announced, "a complete restructuring of my understanding of tactical doctrine. The humans did not fight the way we expected. They did not fight the way the simulation expected. They found weaknesses in scenarios designed specifically to have no weaknesses, and they exploited those weaknesses with prejudice." He paused, looking at the human team who stood at relaxed attention, several of them still covered in simulation marker paint and looking entirely too pleased with themselves. "The Assembly's Security Council application for human membership is hereby approved with full tactical integration authorization. We would be fools to not utilize these capabilities in our collective defense." Thrace's voice took on a dry, almost amused tone. Though I suspect our training scenarios will need significant revision to account for human, let us call it creative interpretation of engagement parameters. Captain Reeves stepped forward. Commander, on behalf of humanity, we accept this responsibility, and we promise to only creatively interpret engagement parameters when absolutely necessary. Define absolutely necessary, Thrace challenged. Whenever it seems fun, Maya muttered, just loud enough for the microphones to catch. The assembled crowd, a mix of species from across the assembly, erupted in laughter. Even Thrace's scales shifted to a color that I had learned indicated humor. Later, as the crowd dispersed and military personnel began the long process of analyzing what had just occurred, I found myself once again talking with Maya. She was sitting on the equipment crate, drinking something from a container labeled water, though given human culinary adventurousness, it could have been anything. So, I said, settling beside her with my recording equipment off for once, you stepped into that arena weeks ago, claiming humans do not lack courage. I think you proved your point. Maya smiled, the expression tired but genuine. I did not prove anything about all humans. I just showed what one human could do when properly motivated. But yeah, I think the message got across. What message specifically? She considered the question, taking another drink before answering. That we are not asking for membership in your assembly because we need protection or guidance. We are offering partnership, bringing capabilities you did not know you needed. We are not superior. We are different. And different can be exactly what you need when standard approaches stop working. You sound like a diplomat suddenly, I observed. God, I hope not. Diplomats have to watch what they say. She grinned. I get to be the crazy one who fights training drones and breaks military simulations? Way more fun. And way more dangerous, I pointed out. Sure. But here is the secret they do not tell you about being human. She looked at me directly, her expression suddenly serious. The danger is kind of the point. We evolved in danger. We thrive in danger. We find purpose in overcoming danger. Take that away, and we get bored. Start looking for new challenges to overcome. That sounds exhausting, I admitted. It really is, Maya agreed cheerfully. But it also means we will never stop adapting, never stop finding new solutions, never stop stepping into rings that everyone else is too smart to enter. Which, for a collective defense force facing unknown threats across the galaxy, seems like a pretty useful trait to have on your side. She was right, of course. The Assembly had spent centuries developing protocols and procedures designed to handle known threats in predictable ways. Effective, certainly, but limited by its own success. The introduction of human tactical thinking, human adaptability, human courage defined not by absence of fear, but by action despite it, was going to change everything. I published my final report 3 days later, a comprehensive analysis of human integration into Assembly security forces, complete with arena footage, simulation results, and interviews that captured the essence of what made these beings so uniquely dangerous and valuable. The title wrote itself, really. I called it Stepping into the Ring: How Humanity Redefined Courage for a Galactic Age. It won the Assembly Journalism Prize for Cultural Analysis, which was nice, but more importantly, it started conversations across member species about the nature of courage, the value of adaptability, and the realization that sometimes the most valuable allies are the ones who approach problems from completely unexpected directions. Maya Okafor, the tactical analyst who became a symbol for human integration, continued serving with Assembly forces. Last I heard, she had been promoted to Major and was running advanced tactical training programs, teaching other species the art of creative problem-solving and, quote, beneficial rule interpretation. Commander Thrace eventually became one of humanity's strongest advocates in the Assembly, though he still maintains that their approach to combat gives him processing errors. He and Maya apparently meet monthly to argue about proper tactical doctrine over what humans call beer and Vexillans call fermented plant poison. As for me, I built an entire career covering human integration stories, 300 cycles of journalism, and I finally found a beat that never got boring. Because humans, individually unimpressive by most metrics, collectively became one of the most influential forces in assembly history simply by refusing to accept that biological limitations meant anything in the face of sufficient determination. They stepped into the ring before anyone else moved. And in doing so, they changed the game entirely. Sometimes courage is not about being fearless or having advantages. Sometimes it is just about showing up, taking the hit, learning the pattern, and adapting until you find the solution everyone else missed. And sometimes, just sometimes, that is exactly what the galaxy needs.